Hello? Yeah. To begin with, I wanted to congratulate all of you. Right? There are a lot of events these days, mostly cultural events, but having this conversation or having this event based on a professional background, right? Engineering and what we achieved in life, our background and celebrating that, and then making a model for our kids. That's a very noble idea. Weekends I follow my wife most of the time, and that's a Diwali event or a Onam event, right? But this is a real welcome change, right? I really want to congratulate KEAN for doing this. Believe it or not, some 15 years ago, I attended maybe the first or the second KEAN event. I drove a lot. I can't remember where it was, but since then I did not have an opportunity to attend the other events, right? And I'm really pleased and honored to come here today and to connect back, right? Thank you for that. So I want to keep it very brief because I also know that there are very exciting cultural events here. Conversation could tend to be boring at some point. I'm pretty sure of that, so I'll try to keep it as brief as possible, right? Nina called me a couple of weeks ago and asked me to talk in this event, and she gave me a complete freedom to choose the topics, right? So I decided to use my literary freedom or artistic freedom, and I decided that I'll pick 3 topics, right? So the 3 topics I have is, one is what makes an engineer, right? And second one is, obviously I'm introduced as someone working in Citibank in the technology area. So I want to talk a little bit about what's happening in the industry. I'll keep it brief. And then finally, the third topic I'm thinking of is really how engineering impacted me and the life lessons I learned from engineering, right? Or everything I do, I have to say that influenced by my educational background and what I learned. So I want to share a few experiences as well, right? Ultimately, these are all personal observations and my own ideas. So take it as it is, right? That's the disclaimer I wanted to make. So what makes an engineer, right? And in my current role, if I really look at that, I often wonder, am I an engineer anymore? 90% of my time I answer emails. 5% is on spreadsheet and another 5% is on PowerPoint, right? And I, as a technology manager, sometimes I attend demos. Weekends, very rarely, maybe I'll download a new software package and try to, understand what it is. But I have to say, most of the time I give up that half the way because I don't have the patience all the time to pursue, right? But despite all this, am I still an engineer? That's the question which often comes to my mind. And my search usually goes back to, the lessons I learned, right? I went to TKM College of Engineering, and ultimately, my answer is really the lessons in engineering mechanics, right? I had a very terrorist-like teacher teaching engineering mechanics, Mrinalini. Most of you engineers over here, would have learned a simply supported beam, right? If you haven't, raise your hands. Most likely you did. Okay, you haven't, right? So the simply supported beam is a theoretical construct, right? You have a beam resting on 2 pivots with what they initially teach is that, in the middle there's a load. Typically it would be like 2 pillars, a line on the top, and then a load in the center. And I'm saying that it's theoretical because in reality, a beam like that won't exist, except in Kerala, right? In Kerala, if you really look at that, in across our rivers or towed, there'll be, a plank of a coconut, trunk will be laid, across to stones. That would be the nearest example of a simply supported beam, right? But the point is that they will teach you the simply supported beam, and they'll introduce the idea of bending moment, right? Shear stress and bending moment. If you have a load in the middle and it's transferred to two ends, they'll tell you that the shear stress is, let's say the load in the middle is W, and many of us would have learned this. It's just a matter of refreshing your memory, right? Go back to the classes, you'll remember this. They will say the shear stress is W by 2, the bending moment is W by 2 into the length from the middle, that would be WL by 4, right? So basically the bending moment is bending the beam, right? And if you want to construct that beam, you need to understand these things and design for this, right? So basically, if a simply supported beam is bending like this, the idea is that you need to put a reinforcement at the bottom, right? Because it's going to bend like a lens, or in a concave manner, right? In the top it's compression, in the bottom it's the opposite of compression, whatever that is, the stretching. Right? So that's why in a simply supported beam you put a reinforcement at the bottom. And when you put the reinforcement at the bottom, reinforcement is often a steel. Steel can take the stretch, concrete can take the compression. So on the top, you don't need, the steel structure, but in the bottom you need, right? They'll teach you that first. And then they would tell you that, look, simply supported beam is a theoretical construct. It's not really exist in real life. In real life, you have a beam with, load throughout, right? And they'll teach you that there's a beam with a continuous load on top, right? And then they'll, take it to the next level, and they say that the simply supported beam cannot exist. It has to be fixed on both ends. And if it's, gripped on both ends, then what would happen is that the beam bends in a weird way. It bends like this, like a spectacle, right? Or in a wavy manner, right? That means when you put the reinforcement at the beginning, at the both ends, the reinforcement has to be on top. In the middle, the reinforcement has to be on the bottom. Now the point is that these are the basic constructs, right? Now they started with a simply supported beam. They put a continuous load on it, and then they said that if it's a fixed beam, it comes this way. With that lesson, they would say that now you can start to design, a structure with it. Build a scaffolding, build a framework with multiple beams on it. Now every single beam, every single load-bearing structure on that will go back to the same principles as the simply supported beam or the fixed beam you learn. The idea is that in engineering, what we learn is we will break down a problem into its fundamental construct, right? And then they will teach you how to build a complex structure based on the most fundamental form. And that's what we really learn, right? So I am a civil engineer who studied in TKM, and then I went to IIT and learned applied mechanics. I studied some CAD/CAM engineering, and then I jumped into software engineering, right? But I can, after a bit of retrospection, thanks to Nina, she asked me to talk about this. I am confident that even in my email spreadsheet-driven work in Citibank in the technology division, I am still fundamentally an engineer who uses the basic constructs of problem solving, which I learned way back in TK, right? And you take any branch of engineering, the idea of deconstructing a problem into its fundamental constructs are the same, right? In electronics and in computer science, it may be learning about a gate, binary gate, on off, and then using that binary gate, constructing a complex transistor, or something beyond that, right? In mechanical engineering, it could be a rack and pinion arrangement, right? So as you take on your career, you become senior in your field. You may become a manager, a leader. You will explore many other traits you need. But I believe fundamentally what makes an engineer is really our ability to deconstruct a problem to the fundamental forms and use that in our everyday life, right? So I strongly believe that in spite of my time in email and a spreadsheet, I am an engineer, and that's thanks to TKM College, where I learned, and some of the most inspiring teachers there. Right? I'll also tell you one another example, which I found it very profound. And it goes back to the same beam story, right? I talked about simply supported beam, and now if you think of a cantilever beam, that's a weird construct, right? It's only supported in one place, right? So it bends like this. In the simply supported beam, the reinforcement goes at the bottom. So if a beam bends like this, the reinforcement has to go on top because the strain or the stretch is felt on the top. Now, what often happens is that when they construct a cantilever beam, there's scaffolding in the beginning, right? Because the concrete is not set, and you have to let the concrete set before you remove the scaffolding. But when and in a cantilever beam, when they start to remove the scaffolding, people are not often confident. Can I remove this? Because it's really projecting outside. If I remove this, will this fall down, right? That's a genuine fear the masons have, right? So some people, will make a mistake. They would keep a prop at the end. They'll remove most of the scaffolding, but since it's hanging out, they would think that, look, I'm not that confident. If I remove that final prop, it may fall down. So they'll keep a prop at the end, right? Can you imagine what would happen if you keep a prop at the end? The beam will behave in a way it's not designed to be there, right? If you keep the prop at the end, what happens is the beam will bend in the opposite direction. Now the stress is felt, or the stretch is felt at the bottom, and it will crack, right? Now these were some of the practical lessons, the great engineers at civil engineering department, taught me. My professor over there, Nisad, these may be snippets which we learned, in my case 30 years ago, right? But those ideas I carried through my career, applying in different areas. So I'm concluding my first topic, which is, am I an engineer? I think I'm still an engineer, and I owe it to my civil engineering lessons, even though I transcended to different technologies in my career. I think the basic lessons stays. Now I'll switch topics, talking a little bit about what I do now, mostly software development for a bank. And if you really think about software development, the earlier term, the predominant term in the early development phases of software was programming. Now if you notice, it's not programming anymore, it's software engineering, right? And the word engineering is getting more and more prominence in the recent days than in the past, right? And it would become more engineering focused than ever. And that's because as we build software, what we are doing is really these days developing an assembly line to continuously produce the code, right? And the ideas are called, or the terms are, if you are a software engineer, you would know that. If not, what we are calling it is, continuous integration and continuous development. There are concepts like DevOps. Over there, we want to make everybody who is involved in the software development workers in an assembly line akin to a mechanical or a manufacturing division. That's the way the engineering progresses, right? And it used to be a lot of programming in the past. Now it's more like using frameworks and knitting things together and controlling quality and controlling the process, very similar to how you build a car or how you build an aeroplane, right? That's where the software industry is turning to, more focus on engineering than programming, right? And obviously, Sodimon talked a lot about artificial intelligence and machine learning. I truly believe that would transform the industry for another time, with fundamental changes happening, right? Akin to maybe an industry revolution or the internet era, or even beyond that, changes would be brought in by artificial intelligence. Right now, generative AI, it's more of large language models and talking about how you can how the language capabilities are brought to a computer, and that itself will transform many jobs. I don't know whether the lawyers would work the same way, or the county or municipal offices would work the same way. In my area, there are thousands of examples. In many cases where people are involved in creating textual data, the human beings writing up things that will be ultimately transformed by this technology, right? As a human, you only need to provide ideas in the crudest form, and the computer will produce, present that in an elegant form, right? And the duplicate reduction, understanding the essence of what you wanted to convey and comparing that in multiple places, all these would become a computer's job, right? And I think that it would be truly game changing, and to our youngsters, that's a great area to focus on, right? Learn the fundamentals, but learn what's happening in the industry, and there's a lot of transformational opportunities within artificial intelligence. I also think that LLM, you ask a question to ChatGPT, and ChatGPT produces a speech, produces a story. And this is a watershed moment, because the programmer or the engineer who created ChatGPT have no way of predicting what the answers are coming by, right? Nowhere in the past that happened, right? When you develop a software, you always knew what the software output will be based on your inputs, right? But in this particular instance, it's really like, the computer is thinking, right? I know that I can't say that, the idea of computer consciousness is, a very debated and very controversial topic, but if a computer produces a speech which the creator of that program is not predicting, right, can't control, almost akin to computer thinking, right? And that's in my mind, that's a watershed moment. And that's also is going to lead to more of general intelligence in these artificial models, right? So I'm going to predict that maybe our kids, or if you live for another 20 more years, maybe most of us will live around 50, 52, maybe towards my old age, we will see a lot of differences in this, a lot of changes in this area. And if LLM can happen, models which are going to produce general intelligence is not far away. So it's going to be a brand new world, and human beings would need brand new ways to deal with this, right? That's my prediction about, or that's my second topic, what I do and how I see technology in my area, or in general, wherever it's applicable, right? And my final segment is about thinking a little bit about how my engineering background, formed my views on life. That's the final topic I wanted to talk about. A few years ago, maybe part of a midlife crisis, I decided to get a tattoo, right? And I was looking for something brief, because ultimately you are going to etch that on your body, right? So it has to be meaningful, it has to convey something. I was looking for something profound, right, to write on my body, right? And what I ultimately selected is the Sanskrit was Aham Brahmasmi, right? And Aham Brahmasmi means you are in sync with the universe, right? Or in plain English, it means we are stardust, right? And if I may expand on that a little bit more, the universe was formed as maybe with a big bang. Initially there was hydrogen, right? Hydrogen cloud clustered together. There was intense heat and intense reactions on that. Based on that fusion reaction, helium was formed. With further intense reactions, higher elements were formed. And that nebula exploded. Stars were born within the core of stars. All these elements were thriving, right? Carbon, iron, and all those were formed. And when those stars died, got exploded, these matter were spread all over the universe, right? And ultimately, if you cut your finger or cut your skin, and if you look at the blood in your blood coming out, the redness of that blood is iron, which we owe to the dead stars, right? So, that's something I truly believe, right? And I believe that if you think of that, think in that fundamental form, how we existed, then the ideas of race, religion, nationality, none of that is, going to matter to us, right? We are connected in a profoundly different, ultimate way, which, all these petty differences we fight about, none of them matters, right? So I truly believe in that, that Sanskrit was our forefathers thought of Aham Brahmasmi, and what it means. That's, if you ask me what's my religion, that's what my religion is, right? So I finally decided to etch that on my my body as one thing I believe deeply, and to be honest, that thinking goes back to what I learned as an engineer too, right? Seeing things in a fundamental manner and explaining things based on science and technology, and not falling for anything else. And as a final thought, only other thing I wanted to say is that I grew up in a small village in Kerala. I did not know about engineering for a long time, except for one of my cousins who was a civil engineer, a distant cousin. So I followed his path. I asked him what he did, and that's how I finally wrote the exam and got my admission in TKM College of Engineering, right? And as a bewildered, hopeful, nervous kid, first day in the college, I was walking up. Those who know TKM, they know that there was a huge staircase. I was walking up with a landing in the middle, and then it goes to the office complex on the first floor. Once you climb up the first landing, there's a quote on the wall, and it said, "Small things make perfection, but perfection is not a small thing." And that's again, another thing which got etched in my heart, right? And everything I do, I have a profound respect for things which are perfect, and I realize that it's small things which would make perfection, right? And that's everything I look for, whether food or things which are mechanical, or computers, or I look for the pursuit of perfection in those areas. Right? For example, when it comes to food, one food item I like the most is the Japanese sushi. And Japanese sushi is made of 3 ingredients: rice, vinegar, and a piece of raw fish. But, and within those 3 simple things, the pursuit of perfection is so that people learn to perfect that sushi for years. There's a documentary called The Jira Dreams of Sushi, and that's the journey a sushi chef took 50 years to perfect a sushi. But then, if you fundamentally think about it, it's 3 ingredients, right? So everything you do, even the smallest item, has room for perfection. And that's that's another thing I strongly believe and look for, right? And it's not really seeking perfection, it's really progress over perfection. Every day take a small step towards perfection and learn that it's these small things which take you there, right? So that's what I wanted to say, 3 things. Hopefully I did not bore you too much. There are very exciting other things here. Thank you for tolerating me. Bye.
Engineers are best known for problem solving, especially if you have spouses in your homes who are engineers. If something's wrong in the house, they will fix it for you, woman or man, it doesn't matter, right? And another thing that caught my mind was AI. When Mr. Shyam talked about AI, definitely he says we are living in a watershed moment, and I totally agree. It scares me and it calms me, it inspires me, but it sometimes scares to see how much the computer intelligence has progressed, that we do not know if it's going in a positive or a negative manner, but hopefully we pray that everything goes well and everything will be more helpful for humankind. Another thing is about perfectionism, and I truly agree. I think each one of our small water drops or small efforts we contribute to the community will definitely bring a good, perfect result in the community. So thank you, Mr. Shyam, once again. Now I would like to welcome Mr. Tahseen Mohammed. As I said, he's a very important person in every family night because he comes to entertain us. He's a very good singer. So put your hands together for a song by Mr. Tahseen Mohammed.